Hey everybody. Again, I've got my my screen recorder in student view so that I can be looking at exactly what you're looking at. So I want to talk about the summary response instructions and give you sort of an oral kind of oral instructions so you know that you can be sure that you're understanding everything clearly, or that I'm communicating clearly so that you can understand clearly. All right. So notice that this is a really about a maximum 3-page assignment. It's really less than that when you think about the length of a summary. So remember that this is a formally evaluated, man, I can't talk today. Formally evaluated assignment, meaning it's one of those that's going to have a grade on it and not strictly points. So I want you to realize you need to adhere to the kind of criteria. And this is typical of the English papers. When you write for an English class, we always use Times New Roman 12-point font, double spaced. It's in MLA 8 style. So if you're unfamiliar or it's been a while, maybe you need to go to the MLA link that I supplied you with the textbook, and you can look up anything in MLA 8. It really MLA 8, Modern Language Association. Changes were substantial so that we could keep track of or learn various ways to cite online sources and digital sources of a variety of so many kinds. Okay, so your objective, your purpose is not to solve the issue, but to make it clear argumentatively where you stand on the issue. That's your argument. And to persuade your readers to perceive your position as a viable one. In other words, you're not necessarily trying to change someone's whole mindset, but you are trying to convince them that the way you perceive the situation is viable, or is credible, I guess we could say, or is one to consider. Right? So keep in mind 3 pages. 1 page for the summary. The other 2 pages are allocated to the response. All right? The response, so you're going to submit 3 pages as one document. So it's a 3-page document. One will have one page will be the 10 to 14 line summary of whatever article it is you're going to respond to. The second and or third page will be on your response to whatever article you summarized. All right? So here's what you should take into consideration. Like what do you already know before you even write this paper or before you even sit down to kind of hammer it out? You assume that your readers are familiar with, but not quite as knowledgeable of the controversy that you're going to point out as you. You're going to provide a summary of your article to familiarize your readers with the situation. Now, in your case, it's likely that everybody has read, all of your readers in our class have read the article. You still need to summarize it so that, kind of for the purposes that some other person could read it and think to themselves, wow, I want to pick up that article and read the entire article after reading that summary. Okay, so you should be able to capture enough of the information that another person could read not only your summary, but your response and feel that they could take a position or be, either convinced or not by your presentation of your information. Likewise, the readers may also not have taken sides yet or even hold a position different for yours. So you'll need to consider oppositional views and choose strategies to enlist their support. So in other words, it's not like, I say you need to add a period here. It's not like, that you already have people. I don't want you to necessarily imagine that everybody's already opposed to your idea or that everybody is all on board with your idea. You need to kind of decide what kind of positions people might be taking, and then what the oppositional views mean. Maybe you need to add a concession to strengthen it. All right, so one of your strategies, and I tell you, consider implementing a concession. That sounds like this. No one would suggest that individuals merely ignore their digital footprint. However, asking students to blah, 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 blah. So you can see a concession isn't a full rebuttal. It sort of just says, hey, reader, I know there's other stuff involved here. And then you have to kind of air those different, you have to admit that so that you can move on with your argument. And that's kind of what the purpose of a concession is to treat your reader in a fair-minded way. That's what academics do. We don't pound people. We don't, pound the heck out of them to try and agree with us. We try and argue like our readers are fair-minded and deserve information presented adequately and accurately. Another strategy, you might consider making a comparison to something acceptable to your readers. In other words, similar to blank, perhaps privacy should be perceived as a human right. So, deciding that maybe you will compare it to something helps illuminate the meaning. All right. So some of these things are going to come up again, really, when we do our definition essay, a couple weeks from now. Some of these same strategies. Strategy 3, consider making your verbs or adjectives align so that you can create tone and texture in your response. These elements can be harnessed to create momentum and add a layer of persuasion to the paper. So this is what I'm saying. You want your verbs and adjectives. I mean, if you're going to decide that something is perilous, then probably in order for you to be more persuasive, you're going to need to be selective with your verbs and adjectives and adverbs, so that you can develop that tone and texture using words, right? So using vocabulary to create momentum. And that adds momentum. We don't realize that we're trying to create momentum in a reader's mind. The momentum is, I'm getting closer and closer to making meaning, right? So that's the momentum that we want to create with our own writing. So here's what you're going to complete. So if you go, oh my God, PK, what all am I turning in? All right. So you're going to complete these things. And I've just, temporarily right here for this purpose called them A, B, and C. All right. So let me explain them. What you're going to turn in, submit on Canvas. Page 1 is your 1-paragraph academic summary, and it has its own rubric. All right. So make sure that you see that. Pages 2 through 3 is your 2-page response, which must begin with a summary of a summary in the introduction, and then should focus on the most important or dire, compelling, disturbing, or illuminating points you want to explore in the remaining space. Note, you will not likely have room to cram everything into a 5-paragraph essay, so you should try another framework, okay? In other words, this is the perfect chance for you to say, no way, I'm not going to default to the 5-paragraph essay. All right, be brave. 2021, we need to be brave. We need to think outside the box. We need to think outside the 5-paragraph essay. So, be a risk taker and see what you can do. All right, so don't forget what a summary of a summary is. Taking that summary you wrote right here, turning it into some kind of a catalyst, or your reader will likely recognize the work that you're summarizing, so they'll have an idea of what you're trying to do with your argument. So one of the criteria is that you must have a summary of your summary somewhere in the introduction to shape your argument and to move your readers in a particular direction. Okay, your reader needs a door opened for them into the topic that you're going to discuss or argue. So the summary of a summary is a perfect way to get your reader through that door. Look through the templates in the They Say, I Say textbook, and choose ones that work best for you. They don't have to be handled quite as, perfunctory. They look in some ways very like, primary looking, but they're just templates, and you can, their template means you've got something to work with, but you can modify it to make it work for you. So you might consider a response in which you acknowledge the acceptable to arrive at the unacceptable. So, there might be parts of the author's argument that are acceptable, and at some point it just becomes, they take a turn that makes it seem unacceptable. So you could argue with the author, agreeing on a few issues, but do so only to arrive at the issue you consider the focus of your response. Okay, this may be where you disagree with the author or build support beyond the author's point. So it could be that your article, you completely agree with the author and you want to ramp up more support. You want to build on that author's idea. Well, that's okay. You can do that too. So there's this feels like an easy response, and in some ways it is because it isn't long. But it's all you that's got to drive it. Okay, this is you taking this, writing a summary, then making a summary of a summary to place in your introduction, and having a decent, normal-sized introduction in your essay. I'm sorry, in your response. All right, the mechanical stuff. In the English department, mechanical stuff means grammar, syntax. It's all the stuff that isn't based on ideas. It's kind of the kind of the skeleton and the nuts and bolts and how you hold it together. So let's go through it. Your paragraphs, this should sound familiar to you. Your paragraph should be approximately 10 to 14 lines of text, not sentences. You should not have these page-long, bloated paragraphs. Readers need, normal length paragraphs so that they can assimilate information and make decisions. If your paragraphs are too long, you have tasked your reader with organizing your ideas rather than strictly making meaning. Remember, the reader's only task at all is to arrive at your intended meaning. Readers don't have any other job other than that, unless you task them with it. But if you task your reader to organize for you, your reader is using valuable energy organizing rather than making meaning. So the brain is not capable of doing both at the same time well. So give your readers, no matter who they are, a break, okay? Also, in between those paragraphs at this stage of writing, you should be able to implement smooth functional transitions, okay? In my experience as a teacher who engages with writing components, students typically, I don't know, they maybe make their paragraphs too long because they're afraid to transition and keep going. All right, so don't be afraid of transitions. You guys have the power of Google. You can Google what does a good transition look like. You can go to the OWL, Purdue, look up transitions. I expect there to be transitions. You're not in freshman comp. You should be able, by this stage of your academic career, to create writing that has really purposeful, strategic transitions. All right, consistent college, get this, consistent, not just one or two college level expressions. It should be 100% college level expressions, okay? Not the professor did an amazing job on the study. The professor conducted a groundbreaking study. See the difference between those? One is like high school or junior high, one is college level. Wordiness should be held in check, okay? Held in check means, hey, hold on to it and watch it. Again, not due to the fact that, but since or because. Remember, there's zero reward for wordiness in English 145. You are not in a class that rewards you to bloat out your papers. And in fact, what will happen, the opposite will happen, that you will lose points for bloating, kind of just bloat that's there instead of content. So I want you to be aware of that in terms of grading. First person point of view. You may use I sparingly, but you should control it and see how infrequently you can employ it. All right, for example, saying, I believe, every other sentence would be overkill. So plant your first person I, strategically instead of haphazardly. Try and think of I as salt, okay? Any meal sometimes I'll go out for Mexican food, back in the day before COVID, my favorite part is always chips and salsa. In fact, I eat so many chips and salsa, I practically have to take my meal home with me. But everybody, there's people who don't like salt on their chips. There's people who like a lot of salt. But, for most of us, if there's too much salt, it can ruin the meal, or it can just make you go, meh. Well, that's how first person I feels. Think of it as salt. A little teeny bit goes a really long way. In this paper, you do not need any outside sources. You only need the article you're going to summarize and your ideas. Okay? Notice you must implement at least one template and identify it. You do that by noting which template on which page number it occurs in our textbook. So you would say, you're just going to say, identify your template, put it immediately after your really brief works cited entry, which should have your one article cited. You can use language like, I found the ideal template on page blah, 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 and I used it in my third. So this is what